and the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. And this is Doug Boles. He's the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Hello, Doug.
Hello, Kevin.
Thank you for the winter weather here in Indiana.
You know, I would give the credit to that to Mark Miles and Allison Millangton, who last time we had a big event here, which was the Super Bowl in 2012.
That's right.
The weather was wonderful, so I'm hoping that sort of 2012 weather is why we're having this as we lead into the 100th. As I sat down here, there was a question on my chair. So I assume this was for somebody else.
I think that's left over from the last group.
If you could choose a superpower, what would you choose? Which is kind of fitting. As we're counting down, we only have 169 days to go before we have the 100th running of the Indy 500. I would choose the power to stop time, but allow people to still work
or to clone
and
yourself.
Build things.
Either one.
You know, I'd rather stop time. I don't think
Okay.
anybody needs two of me. That's already one of me is already a problem. So I don't know that we need a second one.
Well, we'll open it up for questions here in a few minutes. So if you have something, just kind of raise your hand and we'll go through things. But I think people are always interested as we get closer, and there will be more announcements as we move forward. Obviously, the 100th is going to be very special. What can you share about the planning stages right now of what IMS has in store?
Well, certainly the 100th is going to be important. You think about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500, and what makes us special are the 99 races and the 106 years that came before 2016. So we're really focused on that. But even more than that, we're focused on looking back at history, but we really want to also look forward, because we're all going to tell you on May 30th that the most important race ever run at the Speedway is going to be the 101st running. So we're really using this as an opportunity to celebrate our history, which makes us special, but also talk about how are we going to make sure that 100 years from now, there are people like this sitting around waiting for the 200th. So I think that's really one of the most important things. And then the other thing, in terms of real big announcements, we're going to focus on those 100 days out from the start of the Indy 500. So February 19th is going to be a really big day for us at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Frankly, it'll be a big day around the country. The PR team, the marketing team have a whole bunch of plans related to that. We've learned over the years that people, in particular in the Midwest, don't really start paying attention to what they're going to do in the spring until they can feel spring coming. Okay. So it's as the thaw first starts to come, as spring break comes around, you really start paying attention. And we can see that in our ticket sales numbers. So ticket sales numbers tend to go up in that period of time. So we're really focusing on our efforts on those 100 days. So you're going to see a lot of things really beginning February 19th. Right now, the big stuff is how are we doing with the construction projects? We've got 250 people as we sit here, not including the folks that work for the Speedway, but contractors out building the new roof over the paddock penthouse grandstands, preparing to start work on Gate 1. We're going to have a whole brand new Gate 1. The fence project is literally finishing up as we speak. The fence looks unbelievable. We've got Wi-Fi going in. We've got new concession stands, new restrooms. There's all kinds of activity at the Speedway. So that's where that 169-day continuing to decrease window becomes a lot of pressure for us. So our focus really, especially the weather's been so nice, is get as much work as we can get done now, because we know at some point it is Indiana and we're going to have some winter and it's going to slow us down a little bit.
This is all part of Project 100, which has been in the planning stages for a little while, so we're going to see the fruits of all of this work by the time we get to May next year. You know, one of the things I was interested in is one of the new ticket package areas on the main straightaway. There's sort of pseudo suites, and you can explain better what that is, but it seems like an opportunity for an individual to get the suite experience without either finding a company or paying something that's out of their price range.
So in 2015, if you wanted a real high-end hospitality experience at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the only option really you had was to rent a suite for the entire year. Really, it's $110,000 to rent that suite. That's really out of the price range of a lot of people for sure, and a lot of companies just can't do that as well. So we took a page out of a lot of the newer stadiums who have the club seating. So you have what's really a stadium seat, but then you have access to a club, some hospitality aspects that come along with that. So we took the Holman suites, which are the suites on the front stretch on the outside of the track, sort of towards turn 4. And it used to be 27 suites, and we've reduced that. It's going to end up somewhere between 6 and 9 total suites. Okay. And then the southern portion of that, or 2/3 of that, are going to be individual seats, with access to this club. So it's about 1,100 seats. They're $1,750, but they're good for every day that the track is open. So they're good in May, they're good in July. If we add additional events, they'll be good then. So it's a great opportunity for individuals that come out every day and want something more than just to sit in the grandstands, and it's really good. Where we're really getting a lot of traction is a company that says, you know, I'd like to have 4 or 6 seats that I could bring my customers to every event out here, but I just don't want the expense of a suite that's my own. And moreover, You got to manage it, you got to staff it. So there's a lot of turnkey element to this. So we've found some great success in it. We've only been on sale with it for a couple of weeks, and we're over a third full with it already. So I think that'll definitely sell out here by sometime in early January. So we're pretty excited about that opportunity.
As you mentioned, a lot of the ticket buying is going to come in probably around the 100 days before the race, and maybe even getting into April and May. That said, are we going to be close to a sellout? Do you need to get tickets now if you want to have any choice at all where you're going to sit?
Well, if you want choice of where you're going to sit, you need tickets
Some
now, right?
choice,
Right.
any
so
choice,
that's
any
really important.
choice.
So most people who are Indy 500 fans know that the most important 2 weeks, if you want your seats of the year, those 2 weeks that follow the Indianapolis 500, and it's really then becomes a 6-month process really for our ticketing team to take those almost 200,000 renewals that come in those 2 weeks and figure out how are you going to manage through those. And everybody, not everybody, but a lot of them want an upgrade, right? So they're somewhere else, and everybody wants to ultimately get an A stand, B stand, or E stand, upper deck, lower deck. I mean, those are really high priority seats. So we take in all the renewals. Then we look at the folks that say, hey, I just want to stay where I am. We're able to move those to the side, get them taken care of, and then we begin to look at how do we upgrade people that want to upgrade. So if somebody in B stand didn't renew, so who's next on the list based on seniority and sort of a formula that we put together. And we are literally not even done with that. We're going to be done with that. Our team was hoping to be done with it today. So we'll actually go back on sale with tickets sometime here in the next week or so. But what we do know is the renewals are over 13% up from last year. So as you know, since 2011, the numbers have been trending up. We anticipate a great year. Sellout is a difficult one for us to balance because the venue is so big, and we've really focused on the last several years, and you've seen in some places where we've actually taken seats out. We're a little different than a basketball game. The best seat for a basketball game is on the court. The best seat at a race happens to be up higher. Yeah. And especially when you bring a new guest in who thinks, and we've had this happen before, somebody buy a ticket for a husband whose bucket list was they want to go to the Indy 500. They say, I want to be in the front row, and they buy a front row ticket, and then that person comes to the Indy 500 has never been there and has a miserable experience. And we'll call our ticketing office and say, well, that was not what I expected at all. So it's a balancing act for us. We want to sell as many tickets as we can, obviously, but the most important thing is we want a customer to come there to have a great experience. So I think what you're going to see, there's going to be a lot of energy. There's going to be a lot of folks there. Whether it's a true sellout it's probably the way you define it.
Could be a few people here. Still the largest single-day sporting event in the world.
Absolutely. It's 300,000 of your closest friends in the same venue, so we're really looking forward to that.
Now, you mentioned most of the big announcements are going to come as we get closer, but one has already happened much earlier, I believe, than normal, and that's the headliner concert for Carb Day.
You know, you're exactly right. Oftentimes that Carb Day concert announcement doesn't happen until sometime in the spring, and we announced several weeks ago Journey as our band. We actually were talking to Journey for 2015, and scheduling didn't work out right. And we always get a little bit of people on both sides of the fence when we select a band. And what we've learned really is the bands that drive the most people on Carb Day are those bands that are in the 80s that have 5 to 12 hits, because those 5 to 12 hits resonate with people my age, older, but they also anymore resonate with younger kids. Yeah. So it really crosses over very well. And we've tried oftentimes to set, and last year we did this a little bit, we had 3 different bands and tried to hit on 3 different genres, and it doesn't work as well as just grabbing one band that was sort of iconic at its time period. We get a little also folks will say, well, why don't you go after a younger demo and bring in a younger band? Well, when that happens, everybody in Indianapolis that takes that day off and comes out and parties doesn't know who it is, and it doesn't quite fit right. And we've had great success over the last 5 years with our Snake Pit, which is on race day. And that's obviously the day we want people to come out. And our Snake Pit is really the driver for those under 30 adults who we want to get out to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's responsible for 25,000 tickets sold to the Indy 500 that we don't think we sell otherwise, but for the music. Now, the challenge in that, and some of you out there may be saying, well, who cares? They're not race fans. A lot of people started in the old real Snake Pit, and they weren't race fans either, and ultimately they grew up and said, you know what, this is what I do on Memorial Day weekend. I'm going to buy a ticket. I'm going to stay at the Speedway. So our challenge, the challenge that I've got, the challenge CJ has, the challenge that Jared and Alex and the whole team on the communication and marketing side has, okay, now we know who those people are. We have their contacts. How do we now convert them so that when they get tired of hanging out with their buddies in the music, but they know this is what they do on Memorial Day weekend, how do we then convert them to sitting in the grandstands?
So when we look at this event, and I don't know how you go about planning on what should happen, because it's still, whether it's the 97th, the 5th, the 102nd, it's a huge deal, and someone's life is going to change forever, whoever wins that race. But this one we want to make seem and stand out a little bit differently, and we want to, as you said, look to the future, but also embrace the past. How do you balance all of that as to what you're going to do? And I guess I'm still trying to get you to spill the beans a little bit on what kind of. I have drivers still asking me, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the former drivers. Are we going to be invited back? And I said, well, I think you're probably going to be invited back.
So former drivers are always invited back. I mean, it is those 750 plus men and women who've competed at the Indy 500, and then the thousands of others who have supported them in those efforts, whether mechanics or car owners or OEMs or suppliers that have really made that happen, that are really sort of the lifeblood of what makes the place so special. So they're always invited back. We will celebrate all of them in May, sort of like we did in 2011. We will make that a big staple of what we do. But the balancing act is really, it goes on at every level at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I often tell people, we can all agree on what's important to the Indianapolis 500's DNA, the things you would never change. It's 500 miles, it's Memorial Day weekend, it's a yard of bricks, it's a bottle of milk, it's the balloons before the start. I mean, you think it's back home again in Indiana. Those things that we all adopt as extremely important. And what's so beautiful about our event then is there are 300,000 people that take that platform and then build their own individual traditions outside of it. So we all have our own, where we parked, who we go with, the seats we sit in, what time we get there, what gate we go through. I mean, there's all these things that are part of our tradition. And as we make changes, we inevitably screw up somebody's tradition a little bit. So we're really cognizant of that, and it really is a balancing act in everything we do. So even the new roof on the front stretch, it's going to change the way the Indianapolis Motor Speedway looks, but it's not going to make it brand new. The challenge is, how do you change it, offer some new amenities that people expect in a new stadium, but make sure when people show up, it's the same Indianapolis Motor Speedway they fell in love with. So the deck they're standing on is the same deck. We could have torn it all the way down, but we want their seat to be at least on the same deck that it's been from 1950 through 1963, when each of those 4 phases of the upper deck were constructed. But that literally is across every decision we make. There is some significant balancing act that has to take place, because without our tradition, we're just another racetrack. But at the same time, if we just hold on to only our traditions, we're going to end up a racetrack that's a footnote in motorsport history at some point in time. So we have to figure out, how do you stay true to those traditions that are truly in your DNA, but at the same time position it so that the younger generation begins to adopt it and fall in love with it just like we do.
Doug Boles is joining us, the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We're also on IndyCar.com. If anyone has a question for Doug, just kind of get my attention. And okay, go ahead. I'll repeat it. Go ahead.
2 questions, if I may. Just an
Here, I'm mobile.
as an add-on noted, I did my first Indy in 1958, and I've missed a few since then, but not too many. But one, can you tell us who the Grand Marshal's going to be? And 2, what's the plans for the Turn 2 suites? Are you going to change them?
So those are great questions. First of all, thank you for being a long-time customer and fan, and I'm sure you fell in love with it before you showed up. Same time AJ showed up, right? I mean, it's a pretty historic year. You think about the history and what he's meant to our brand, but coming in 1958 is pretty special. And one of the best things about my job is hearing those stories. I mean, we all have that story. Our granddad, our dad, our brother, somebody took us to our first race, and we remember it as if it was yesterday, and that's the foundation of our tradition. So I thank you so much for that. The Turn 2 suites were the first suites that were built at the Speedway. You know, the first memory I have of the Turn 2 suites is Tom Snevis crashed there as a kid, watching that and thinking about what an incredible seat that would have been for somebody that was sitting in there. The Turn 2 suites are, yes, they're older, and they do need some maintenance with them. And again, this is one of those balancing acts. We need to make sure that place stays standing, and that it's painted well, and that we take care of some of the issues that are there. But it's one of those venues inside that the culture is completely different. The way people enjoy the 500 there, really hardcore race fans really don't like the corporate suite box feel. They like where they sit there. So it's one of the ones that, I don't think our lawyers would let us build there again today, because it's just such a tremendous seat. But definitely, we look at what can we do from a maintenance standpoint to make sure that that it's not going to fall down over time. We've even talked about painting it a different color so that it stands out. But certainly, it's probably one of the places where we spend a lot of our time and effort in the winter to keep up with. But the one thing I can tell you right now, I think at this point we would love to keep it. Some folks have seen the hotel RFP that went up, and the idea was maybe you put a hotel in that location, and we've talked about a hotel really since the old hotel was torn down in 2007, 2008, along in there. At this point in time, I don't see that happening, and I really see the Turn 2 suites really staying around. In terms of a Grand Marshal, I think you'll see that announcement again probably sometime in those 100 days as we really get people excited about how that's going to be. And again, the Grand Marshal is another unbelievable balancing act. There's a lot of us that would say, man, it should be AJ, Johnny, Mario, pick one of those iconic winners we've had. Well, one of the things we've used the Grand Marshal and the pace car driver to do in the past is how can we bring in a new audience? How can we put somebody in that ride that maybe is going to get somebody else to turn on the TV who might not otherwise, so that we can begin to build that fan base? And so that's sort of the challenge we have. Do we have somebody that it really makes sense to bring in to do that? So you'll see that announcement sometime in those 100 days out.
And how do you pick between AJ and Mario, or
so I grew
whatever
up,
legend? That would be the challenge.
I grew up an AJ fan, right? And you couldn't be, you didn't like Mario Andretti if you were an AJ fan, right? And vice versa. And I still, AJ is my absolute favorite all-time race car driver. But I'll tell you what, I've fallen in love with Mario Andretti. The guy is an unbelievable ambassador for our sport. He does everything we ask him to do. He gives us unbelievable suggestions as well. He's as fully invested in our series now as he was when he was strapping a race car on his back. And so I've gotten to get this great appreciation for him. My best friend in college was a Mario fan, and he's just can't believe that the battles we had over who was the greatest race car driver ever to live. Now I'm a little softened on that. I still think it's AJ, but I certainly give Mario his due at this point.
You mentioned back home again in Indiana, and I offered this opinion without doing any research or talking to you or anyone else, but I said last summer, it's my opinion that if Jim Nabors is feeling well and is up to it, he could show up on race day, maybe without any notice, and he would be allowed to sing.
Well, it's a bigger decision than just mine, but if it were just my decision, I would agree with you on that one. But it is absolutely a bigger decision than that. And when Jim called us in 2014 and said, look, I think I want to make 2014 my last Indianapolis 500. I live in Hawaii. I come to the continental United States one time a year. It's really taxing on me. He's in his 80s. And he wanted to come and celebrate it. And he didn't want to just disappear and not have an opportunity to say thank you to the fans who made him feel like a real Hoosier. I mean, he believed he was a Hoosier when he was here, and I think we could all see it in the passion he had. And Jim did say when he left that day, hey, I heard 2016 was the 100th. Maybe I'll reconsider. So we've talked about an awful lot of things. So one thing I know is the tradition isn't who sings it. Now, Jim sort of became a tradition because collectively as fans, we wanted him to become the tradition. But what the real tradition is the singing of that song. And when we selected Straight No Chaser for 2015, we selected them because they were from Indiana. They really were excited about doing it. We knew they weren't going to screw it up. They probably weren't going to do it just like Jim, but they weren't going to screw it up. But most importantly, what we knew about them is a lot of them had family members that had been coming to the 500 forever and ever and ever. So they knew how important those 90 seconds were, not just to the Indy 500, but man, that's the most important 90 seconds of the year to me. And you want to make sure that they do it right. And you can argue whether they did it as well or not as Jim, but they didn't screw it up. And that was the most important thing. And following Jim Nabors is a tough task. And I often say it's like Mike Davis following Bob Knight at Indiana University. You can be the greatest basketball coach in the world and the greatest voice in the world, but following a legend is pretty hard to do. So we're reviewing internally where the right step is for 2015 or 2016, and we'll, again, that announcement I think we make inside that 100-day window. One of the things that Allison Millangton and CJ and the team are really focused on is maybe not making the run-up to the Indy 500 completely different, but making it right in the best 30 minutes of pre-race you've ever had in your life. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure we deliver an unbelievable pre-race that's true to a lot of those traditions that we care about as you lead up to that. So a lot of people ask me, what are you going to do completely different? To me, it's not what do we do completely different, but what are we going to do better than we've ever done it before?
As far as the racing is concerned, at what point will we know what the qualifying format is? Has been tweaked a little bit from year to year, and it probably depends on how many cars you think are going to try to qualify for this race. Do you have any sense on that at this point, and how much does that have to do with what the qualifying format will be?
So you touched on one of those tradition questions, right, and balance questions. How do you continue to change and evolve and at the same time not really offend what's important about the brand? And as we looked at how do you modify qualifying a couple of years ago, that was one of those ones that was polarizing, right? You're changing from the old format, which we'd already changed from 4 days to 2, sort of into this new format. I think the new format that we've used the last couple of years is going to be really similar. Maybe a couple minor tweaks, but the way it's happened the last couple of years, I think will stay there. To me, the most important thing is it's 10 miles. and it's the fastest 33 cars that get in the race. I mean, those are the things that are the most important, and as long as we stay true to that, I think we're in good shape. A lot of the car count's going to play into how those 2 days play out, the Saturday and Sunday, but we really haven't given that format a real true ability to see where it goes. We do know that our numbers on Sunday have been better than they've been in the past. Our numbers on Saturday have gone down a little bit. Last year, a lot of that was because of weather. So we're hoping that just the excitement around the way it works, it's the first year in particular, you had an opportunity to see some of the best guys running 3 and 4 times, not just a few laps, but putting it on the line to make sure they were in the Fast 9. And that's really, kind of what we pay to see. We pay to see those guys really lay it on the line, and I'm hoping that fans will continue to give that opportunity. I think that's one of the places that we have maybe the most upside in the month of May to get people excited is around qualifying again.
Well, Dale Coyne Racing is doing his part. He said today, I'm planning on 4 cars for the 500, so that's a +1 from what he's traditionally done. Any other questions for Doug before we let him go? Thank you very much. I can't wait to hear more about what's in store. So February 19th? That's
February 19th.
The back
February
timing,
19th
that's 100
is 100 days out.
Okay.
So that's the day I think we all want to get really excited. We're going to start telling all kinds of stories as we lead forward. I think you'll see some national exposure as we really try and kick that off. We've got a lot of great things planned. I think we're going to get the community really engaged, especially in Central Indiana, over that time period. I've been doing these town halls all over the state since before the 500 last year, and the reception I get in these places is tremendous. And like I said, the best part about the Indianapolis 500 are its fans. It's the fans, really, that have allowed it to survive for 100 years and be this American icon. And you see it when you go around the state, and it's people that have come to 1, or it's people that have come to 60 or 70. I mean, there are people that date back pre-World War II that have come to the Indy 500, and we just have to make sure that we take care of those fans. And then as a group, figure out how we bring in that next generation. The best way to introduce somebody to our brand, and all of you, I think, know this, is to bring your grandson, bring your next door neighbor. When they have that personal opportunity to sit and watch the Indy 500 against somebody like all of us that are so passionate about it, you instantly make fans out of them, and then they bring others. And it's that one-on-one connection that brand has with folks, but when they have it through their next door neighbor or their family member, it becomes lifelong and life-lasting. And I just appreciate all the passion that our fans show. And all the stories that I hear, and even the complaints I hear about the things we ought to do better. It's the best part of my job, and thanks for the opportunity to talk a little today.
Thank you. Doug Boles, the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And for fans of this race and the history of the place, I believe Donald Davidson is going to be here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. So we'll do our radio show, basically, live up here, the Talk of Gasoline Alley with Donald Davidson. Later today, Lynn St. James with a book signing here at 4 o'clock. So thank you for joining us here on IndyCar.com and at PRI.